Well, I can tell you, what excites me is the opportunity for Canada. This whole transition causes us to rethink pretty much everything in the industry to move as quickly as we need to. With Canada being well positioned from my point of view and from Honda's point of view, there's a huge opportunity to take advantage, to reset things that are going to matter to our economy and to our country.
Yeah, it's sort of like a mini industrial revolution in a way, right? As we're trying to electrify. There's been a big push, you see it across Canada, to bring the electric vehicle manufacturing ecosystem, the whole thing, cradle to grave, to Canada to build this industry from ground up. And there's a lot of work involved in doing that because we're building everything, a lot of it.
Absolutely, and we always hear about Canada's productivity challenges, if you will. So this is a big opportunity to, again, invest, to innovate in Canada, to make sure that we can improve on that front. So I think that I find that exciting also, to address what is currently seen as a challenge for our country.
Yeah, and from when you look at the raw materials perspective, I mean, a lot of what Canada has done in its past is ship the raw materials overseas. So this is an opportunity to see that, and this is what I think what really excites me as a geologist and having worked in the industry where we ship all these things overseas, is to see the whole, being able to refine it and then being able to use it and manufacture a product in Canada.
That's really the key for us, right? It's the processing aspect, again, instead of shipping our natural resources everywhere, not benefiting from the value added. I think it's the big opportunity I think we have also. For me, again, I'm a Canadian, and of course Honda's almost my first priority, but being a Canadian and seeing things happen here is extremely important. And so I'm excited about the prospect, again, of seeing a change in thinking and the opportunity to take advantage of companies like Honda bringing the ecosystem or the value chain to Canada and hopefully helping in that way.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, we can't move our resource, but we can innovate and create opportunities to build better. And I think that's one of the focuses that we see when you're looking at the material that we're going to provide. We see ourselves as providing into the battery ecosystem and not just a regular mining product. Right. So being able to produce a product that fits the battery ecosystem from a sustainability point of view, from a quality point of view, I think is obviously pretty important for the battery safety, and that mindset shift. Is I think it is taking hold in Canada. More and more companies looking at from the raw material producer, looking at how do we get more involved in the processing of the material and not just staying to a concentrate that gets shipped somewhere.
Yeah, you just touched on something here which is interesting to me. As Canadians, we always see ourselves maybe perhaps as here's our place in the sandbox, and that's changing right now as a result of this transition. So again, I'm really encouraged with with what I'm seeing, and again, having events like Accelerate and seeing the different players in the industry working on all kinds of things that I had no idea was actually done in Canada. Again, coming together to build that capacity to move forward. So I'm excited.
Yeah, there's a huge innovation going on in this space right now in Canada.
Even with academia, I'm speaking at a couple of, not conferences, but more talking about, classes, if you will, but engineers, and they're working on really interesting things that, again, typically these types of things, at least in our company, would happen elsewhere. They would happen in, in the United States, in our hub in Ohio, or in Japan. And I'm listening to these young people talking about things that they're working on related to the transition to electrification, to mobility. And I say, why not do it here? I mean, we have the educational institutions that are highly ranked in the world, and why not do these things in Canada? So.
And I look at when you think about all of the amazing things you can do when batteries become readily available, when they're out in the world and you can just buy a train car full of good quality batteries, the amount of innovation that's going to happen post the battery in terms of electrical devices that we'll be able to utilize using a readily available high energy source like a battery floating around.
Absolutely. You talk about energy storage and things like that.
Even things like, you look at the amount of scooters that are kicking around. It's just this is an easy picking concept, but people are so creative in this world much smarter people than me looking at all the ways that we can use these things. I think we're going to see some very interesting new types of applications.
Well, mobility in general. I mean, as you know, Honda's not just about cars and trucks, but we, I keep on reminding people, we sell a lot of 6 million small motorcycles in India a year, just to put a frame of reference. And we're working with competitors to standardize batteries, and where motorcycles are the main mode of transportation, and the idea is swappable batteries. So you can, it's kind of like replacing your propane tanks for your barbecue. You go to the corner store and you, again, those are the kind of things that are being worked on, and again, collaboration with competitors that see the need to do this to move to electrification more rapidly. So again, other interesting things happening other than, again, cars and trucks that we talk about here today.
I can't wait to buy a Honda motorcycle that's electric. That'd be great.
There you go. Yeah.
Maybe one day.
We're working on it. We're working on everything electric because we're transitioning everything from what we heard today, from being the largest engine manufacturer to 100% electric, by 2040. So this is a major undertaking for us. And it impacts all of our products. So you can imagine we have marine engines, so what's the application to electrify that? Or is electrification even the best solution for that? Or jet airplanes that people forget, we build jet airplanes, so what's the sustainable, environmentally sustainable solution to jet airplanes? So those are all the things that are advancing in our world, that we need innovation. We need to work with partners, academia, to accelerate our progress there.
I think first of all, there's a standard that gets set, because when you produce a product that has to go into a battery, there's a quality standard and there's a qualification process, and rightfully so. The safety factor that where you're putting these batteries under the feet of someone for the most part. So how you produce the material now changes, I think, pretty dramatically. Like, you're not so much looking at just doing a raw material, you're looking at producing a refined product that can go directly into a battery. And I think the conduit between the two is the battery itself, and being able to produce a product that we move through qualification from our perspective is why a coordinated effort, however the coordinated effort looks, is important, because we also want to be able to sell our product from day one. Yeah. And we want to get it through the qualification as quickly as possible. And I don't think that happens by just like dumping it onto a train car and hoping that someone else takes it.
No, it's almost like the manufacturer needs to come with specifications and to say, this is what we want our battery to do, whether it's range, the resilience, if you will, to charging, if you will. All these things matter. And also recycling. That, again, I don't know, I'm not a technical person, but again, I know enough that this plays into the recyclability of the battery at the end of life. So there has to be a very tight connection, I think, between manufacturers and companies like yours.
Yeah, and I agree. I think I can't see a future where you're producing a battery product that you're not coordinating directly with the end user to make sure that happens. And obviously that's through the cathode manufacturers, the first stage. That's where our lithium would go in a conventional lithium-ion battery. So meeting that spec, meeting those qualifications, I think is going to be the challenge for any raw material producer, to be consistent at it. And that's the skill set that we're developing, and I think Canadians are very apt to be able to develop, is bringing that skill set.
Build that capacity, if you will, to again live up to Canada's promise that we can do everything here, we can do it cleanly, we have all abundance of minerals and precious metals that go into battery. We just need to again build a skill set to make sure we can deliver.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the earlier point. I mean, building this ecosystem here means that we have the skill set, and we have it. Canadians have it, and it takes time to grow, and you'll have universities that will have programs that will be battery chemistry experts, and all of that ecosystem of the full scale of this skill set will grow. And I think it's why, when you look at the investment that you guys are making into Canada, why that's so important is that it will bring that skill set here, because we'll have to have experts, and those experts will become more prevalent.
And we need to work more closely with academia. I'm still amazed of how many projects are being worked on by candidates, PhD candidates in those universities that are 100% aligned with what we're trying to do, and how do we connect the dots on this. Again, a lot of things that we've perhaps done in the past have been done in other places in the world, but I can tell you our profile in Canada has grown significantly with the announcement of our investment, but also the fact that we're trying to build that full supply chain. That I think we need to work with academia locally, governments locally, to try to move as fast as we can, and again build that capacity that's going to serve us well in the future.
Yeah, and I think companies like us, it does take a long time to get a project up and running. So the challenge then becomes for us is to try to meet the timeframes if we can.
That's going to be a challenge. We need to move extremely quickly. Again, as I said, we're regulated as an industry, so we need to live up to the zero-emission vehicle mandate, and so we don't have the luxury of time. And so again, everything we've talked about, I would say, it needs to be done with speed and agility on a go-forward basis. So. I think Canada has a huge opportunity. I think the right things are being put in place. The right connections are being made. Again, I'm just using what's going on today and some of the conferences, the many conferences that are taking place that are focused directly on the EV evolution or the transition. And to me, that's very encouraging, because I think there's an end goal. I think people recognize the opportunity, and what's being talked at this very early stage is how can we move as quickly as possible for Canada to be the center of excellence, if you will, because we have everything that's required to be that center of excellence right here. And how do we exploit all those opportunities, so that we can become the go-to country in 2040.
And the title of what we're talking about today is Made in Canada, and I think that really, to me, is the vision of 2040 or whatever time frame in the future is, having as integrated as you can. And you sort of set that caveat because you don't want to set a bar that's too high, but you want to try to integrate everything for a full ecosystem, from raw materials, keeping it in Canada, processing in Canada, getting into a battery made in Canada, getting into a car that's manufactured in Canada. And there's going to be myriads of different examples where you'll get a certain way, it'll go to the United States, you'll get a certain way, it'll go to Europe. And I think that's all okay. We're building a big, hopefully a very big, robust economy around the electrification. And the more we can do in Canada, the more pieces we can bring to Canada, the betterment of that, portion of the GDP that we're going to start to create that will be carved out in the future. We'll be talking about X% is electrification or battery or however we're going to talk about it. Right now, minerals or natural resources is 15% and 20% if you look at the surrounding stuff. So that's a big portion of our GDP. It's what we do already really well. And so expanding that into this next field and bringing that back to Canada, I think will benefit everybody in the future in the economy that we're trying to build.
I always say that if we're able to, again, take in Honda and our plan to build that full value chain, we have success doing that in Canada. We're going to be the showcase, I believe, that will attract other people, to pay attention and say, oh, you can actually do this in Canada, because somebody's done it, and they've done it well, they've done it successfully. And as I say to, when we're talking to governments about our plans, is that if we establish this hub in Canada, it will attract other investments. But we need to deliver on Canada's promise, all the things that we know are advantages for our country. So I'm very excited about 2040 and what it holds for us.
Yeah, and I think that the productivity that we want to see in Canada grow is going to be directly tied to these types of investments that we make today, and how we're going to see this growing out. So I think that Canadians should be excited about us Canadians trying to build this ecosystem in Canada.
It's a generational opportunity, so let's not miss it.
Yeah, absolutely.